everyone. Sorry about the technical difficulties. That's kind of what happens during the digital age, I guess, right? But good morning, good afternoon, and evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. I'm Fung with HRCI, and today we have Gabrielle Bosché here with the Millennial Solution. She's the president and strategist of Millennial Solution. And most of you joined us last week for the Not Your Mother's presentation on Millennials webcast, which had an amazing turnout. We got a bunch of questions, so we want to follow up today to kind of get those questions and to see if you had anything else. And if you do, you can feel free to type it in the chat, or you can email us at hrcimarketing@hrci.org. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on again. I'm excited to continue answering questions. We had so many questions and overflow, and I had over 300 emails after our presentation last week, so
Yes.
I'm super stoked to get to everyone's questions.
Awesome. So I know everyone's busy, and we don't have a whole lot of time, so we're gonna just kind of jump right in. And then just again, if you guys have questions you'd like to ask live, feel free to type them in or email us. So first question. How would you say that part of a millennial's retirement issue is related to companies not being as loyal as they once were? 30 years ago, an employee had job security. However, that is no longer a guarantee. I have never heard of millennials saying, that job hop because of broken promises about going to college. Ooh, sorry, that didn't come out right. But job security, essentially.
Yeah. If you guys remember from our presentation before, we talked a lot about the number one reason millennials are quitting is because of mismanaged expectations. So either those expectations were not met by their managers, by their company and employer, or even by themselves. Many young people are going into the workforce and they may not know, what is expected of them because, whether we like it or not, this generation has been, really entered into a workforce where it isn't what we were expecting at all. I was expecting when I came into the workforce in 2009 that it was going to be, much more like Mad Men than it actually was. Turns out it's not like that at all. But we have this, mentality that, things are either opportunities going to be much more apparent. We're going to have more access to leadership. That's one of the top frustrations we actually hear with young people is that they want to have access to those who are in charge. They want a relationship with those who are in charge. And because they have great relationships with their parents. Many millennials have great relationships with those who are older than them. And so when they're walking into a workforce and they have essentially a line drawn in the sand and said, you can't go past this, they get frustrated. So that mismanaged expectation is really the number one reason that millennials are quitting. And so you as an HR manager, a director, and a leader in your organization, you can meet those expectations first and foremost during the onboarding process. Onboarding has been one of the most interesting and I think probably surprising things that I've learned in the last 5 years of doing this is that onboarding is the top way that you can not only retain millennials but set an expectation that millennials can feel that they're part of creating a better culture. They're not just, working for you. They're not just collecting a paycheck, but they're developing a company and a culture that's a part of that kind of making a difference, that triple bottom line, if you guys remember that we were talking about, that millennials are expecting. So if you really tap into that, if you focus on the onboarding, not just, here's your welcome handbook and, that's where the bathrooms are, right? But it's, these are the expectations we have for you. We want you to ask more questions.
Yes.
We want you to have freedom to fail. And we want to make sure that you feel like you can be here for the long term because, many millennials are coming in and they don't have that direction. They're used to, being taught to the test. And so because of that, we're used to having that next step given to us. And when it's not given to us, many of us are getting frustrated and moving on.
Okay, thank you. That actually is funny because we were just talking a little earlier about how we've both had managers who were kind of like our best friends at work, and you would never know the difference. But this actually is perfect segue into another question that we had gotten. And the question was, I am an older manager and find that my younger staff treats me like their BFF. This is perceived by other managers to be inappropriate and suspect. I think that shows trust, though. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. If your employee thinks that you are BFFs, you've hit it. You've hit the rock star status with millennials. Because what's different about what millennials want and expect again in the workforce is we want to be friends with the people that we work with. We did this year-long study with Catholic University, and what we found was with these companies we were looking at, one of the top frustrations these young people had is that they don't get to hang out with their coworkers. Yeah. Now, if you're an X or a boomer, not all of you, but you're most likely going to say, I don't want to spend more time with the people that I work with, right? I already spend enough time out of my day. But for millennials, it's the opposite. That's one of the key phrases that they were saying is what they either wanted or what they loved about their workplace is that they liked the people that they worked with. And not just, yeah, I like them, they're good people. It's, I want to hang out with them, whether that's, happy hour or, kayaking on the weekends. That's really what millennials want. So when millennials want you to be their BFF, that doesn't mean that we're going to disrespect you more. And that's a key differentiator between millennials and Xers and boomers is that when a millennial says we want to be your friend, that doesn't mean that we think of you less, right? Because you might think like I'm above and they're below, and to become their friend I have to go down. But we really see everything as very egalitarian. We're a very democratized generation where we lead from the middle, and we want to make sure that everybody's on board. So by you being our friend, it actually shows us that you trust us, that you believe in us, and you see us as a part of the company culture rather than just someone who's going to, listen to what you want to say and work on projects for you rather than work on projects with you.
So it kind of sounds like you want to feel valued, but it's a kind of give-take relationship.
No, of course, and this concept of having friends at work isn't a millennial thing. I don't think I've ever met anybody who's like, yeah, I want to hate my coworkers, right? Like no one says that out loud. But I think the key differentiator is that millennials again are expecting it. That even during the hiring process, as you're hiring millennials, they're now doing culture interviews where millennials will come in and we're like, okay, well, where am I going to go to happy hour after work? And, what kind of lunch options are there? And before you're like, why would you care about those things? But millennials are actually shopping around employers based off of not only the amenities, but also to where, location, the type of people that are going to be there, because millennials really take this holistic approach to where they're working. They realize that they're not just going to be coming in and doing a job for you. They're going to have essentially a lifestyle change. Just like, think about it. We've been trained to go to colleges and universities to go, say, okay, well, where are we going to be hanging out with people and where are we going to go, get midnight pizza or whatever. Millennials are taking that same mentality into the workplace, and we're shopping around opportunities just like we were shopping colleges.
It's definitely this kind of cultural fit that you keep hearing about.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. We want to have fun at work. It's the F word that every millennial wants at work, right? It's fun, which for many in the past, I've had managers tell me, like, if it was supposed to be fun, it'd be called fun. But it's work, so it's called work. Well, we want both.
You can mix it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right, cool. So, next question is, I know we have a lot of these because now the workforce is pretty diverse. You've got boomers, Xers, millennials, and everyone's kind of meshing together. And we hear a lot about how people can work with millennials. So I think there's a lot of questions about kind of the opposite. So are millennials interested in learning how to kind of meet the Xers or boomers or other generations halfway? And if they kind of do, how can we convey that to them or help them sort of better work with the other generations?
Yeah, and this is a really common frustration that I hear from leaders, and I think it's a completely fair one, is, how far do we have to bend, right, before, millennials start to bend back? And I think that any great leader is asking those types of questions because it has to be all hands on deck. When you're creating a new culture, it's not just top down, it's top down and bottom up. So when it comes to helping millennials be better prepared to walk into a generational workforce that has, 3 and sometimes even 4 different generations, you have to help them know that their participation in creating that culture is so incredibly important. So that's why we spend a lot of our time training millennials, because as a millennial, I can talk to someone who's my age and say, here are some of the stereotypes. Let's just be perfectly honest, right? Like, I am brutally honest about how much it sucks to be a millennial sometimes, right? Is because people are going to assume just because you're on your phone, you're texting your boyfriend or making happy hour plans or playing Farmville or something, or Pokemon Go now. But, we could be, writing a note, sending an email, responding to what you're doing. So, how are you perceived, I think, is a really important question millennials need to be asked. And you as the manager can have a really great coaching opportunity with those that you're working with to be able to say, hey, I know that you're better than this, but here's how people perceive your generation. I want you to exceed those expectations that maybe I've even put on you because I know that you can do it. So really throwing down that challenge. but being really honest about it, because it's not helping my generation any to pretend like we don't have frustrations and we don't have a lot of these stereotypes and myths. I write a lot about the 5 myths that people have about millennials. And the top one is entitlement. People just assume that we're entitled because we are ambitious and we really do, want to try and change the world. But if you can flip that on its head and you can address it and basically say, hey, we are making these changes, whether you're changing your office, right, to be more open, whether you're changing your work hours to be more flexible, the more that you change, the better you're going to be able to receive millennials. But we're going to get to a point where millennials aren't going to realize that you're making those changes. So help them be a part of the process so that they recognize and they appreciate the changes that you're making for them.
Okay, that's good to know. So then kind of following that question is, someone has said, my experience is less collaborative, and because I know we talked about millennials being very collaborative, team-oriented, wanting to work together, but this question basically was, they feel like they hear me more than they hear the word team. So is there any insight into how to best provide feedback to millennials when things need to be a little more team-oriented instead of me and I,
right?
We?
Yeah. The team thing is interesting because many millennials have really been trained to think, as a team. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, not all of us have kind of gotten the memo, just like everybody in every generation, right? As a millennial, I remember going to school, whether it was, in science or English class, and everyone was saying, you need to learn how to work on teams, because in the real world, you need to work on teams, right? So I think we have that ingrained, and teamwork is great, but many millennials are very, just like anybody, you have to factor in those personality styles of, being very, very introverted or very extroverted or, whatever that looks like, but really helping that millennial realize that they are a part of something. So how do you create a work environment that works best for them? So say they are an introvert and they don't like working on teams. Right. Well, we love technology. Millennials are obsessed with it. And so why not find a technological solution where, maybe they're working on something on their own and then they're doing like a Google Hangout where they're able to collaborate with people kind of on their own terms, but help them realize that them being a part of the team isn't just to be a part of the team, it's to be a part of the solution. And so if you can help them realize that it's a greater vision, always coming back to vision, always coming back to mission, because millennials are so mission oriented that if they realize that they need to show up, that they need to participate, it's not just, because you have to, and it's not just because you're going to get a participation trophy, it's because we really need your insight and we really need your input. So be flexible to the fact that, your version of team might be different than it is for millennials.
Okay, so it's kind of like trying to see the bigger picture and kind of what's going to happen because you do X, this will improve Y.
Absolutely. Help them make that connection, and many managers assume that millennials are making that connection. And, with all the work that we've done, the international studies we've developed, millennials aren't making that connection. And that doesn't mean that we're, a lower life form or anything. It just means that many of us just haven't had to process in that way because we've had that process done for us.
True. Technology has changed a lot.
Yeah.
So next question is, how does an effective leader communicate to millennial that they are responsible for creating the next opportunity? No one hands anything to anyone without knowing what they want.
Yeah, this idea of empowering millennials to really be the authors of their own destiny is something that has been truly fascinating to me. This idea of millennial success. And what I found is that millennials actually don't like that word. Okay. We found in a number of different studies is the term success doesn't quite resonate with us because we don't know what it means, right? So for maybe our parents' success meant, the big house or the boat, right, or, the fancy things. For Xers, success meant more like work-life balance where you can live your life and kind of have clean lines behind it, between everything. And millennials don't quite know what success means. Okay. So for us, it's much more, a sense of peace, a sense of, I've made it, a sense of contentment, really, where we're able to do it all. That's really what success looks like for millennials. And so helping them feel that, again, that they're a part of that they have to show up for their own success, and helping millennials really find that line of how do I get from here to there. We ask a lot of managers we work with to think like a coach, right? I trained for professional tennis for 15 years. I was a tennis coach for 5 years, and it was so interesting working with, and these guys and girls were pretty much the same age as me, as maybe a year older than them, and helping them make that connection. You had to come alongside them, right? Because a manager tells you what to do and when to have it done by, but a coach is going to come alongside you. So it's going to be messy, but helping them realize that next opportunity is really of their own creation. And many managers I work with are saying, we have all these great opportunities at our workplace, but no one's taking advantage of them. But you're posting it maybe on a bulletin board, or or sending out a mass email, which we've talked about before, why millennials don't read email. So think about how you're actually presenting those opportunities, because it may be that you're spending all this time developing programs, you're not involving millennials in the development of the program, and you're not advertising it in a way that millennials actually resonate with. That's why millennials aren't participating.
Okay. That's interesting. I've always wondered if with all the changes, technology coming into play, and like you said, success kind of means something different, because it's, it used to be you kind of started a company and you probably retired with that company, or you maybe changed jobs once or twice, but things aren't like that anymore. So I wonder if that kind of always changes the mentality and why people keep talking about why millennials are different.
Oh, totally. And personal brand has really thrown a very different coloring to the mix, because with millennials, personal brand is everything, whether it's on our social media, whether it's with our style of clothing. I mean, we've never seen a generation that's so in tune with how we appear. And not to say that we're narcissistic, right? Pew Research actually did a narcissism study of generations, and they found that millennials were only slightly more, and this is self-reporting, so millennials only thought that their peers were slightly more narcissistic than baby boomers were.
Interesting.
Extras got a pass. Apparently, you guys are all much better than us millennials and boomers. But I thought it was really interesting, because so many people look at millennials as the selfie generation. That if you have that many photos of yourself, you must be a narcissist, right? But so much of it is personal branding, and that's changed a lot of what success looks like too. Is my personal brand I can take with me from company to company. True. When other generations, they were their company.
Interesting. Okay, so then there's always a question of why don't millennials ask for what they want or need to know? Why do they just kind of wait?
Yeah, and I think that's a case-by-case basis. Okay. Of course, as we're talking about millennials, there's a difference between a stereotype, which is, find one person and assume everyone is like that one person, or an archetype, which is more scientifically based. Of these things tend to be true, which we gather from scientific and sociological data. So what we find with archetype of what millennials are is many millennials, of course not all, are really afraid of failure. They're afraid of not knowing what the answer is. So I did a research study for a bank, a credit union actually in Maryland, and what we found was over this course of a year of these focus groups, we found that millennials were desperate for financial information, but they were too embarrassed to ask for help. Because they felt like, as the Google generation, we should know everything, right?
You should be able to search and find everything online.
Right, exactly. And so because of that, we were finding information online, but we weren't finding direction online. And so if we were raising our hand and saying, I don't actually know this, we felt like we should know the answer. So that's why we're starting to see a lot of young people not asking for help. Is, I've had young people we've been coaching where they'll Google the answer when the person who literally wrote the paper on, whatever it was is like 2 cubes over, right? Because we feel like we should be able to find the answer, because we're so used to having information accessible. The opportunity then comes in the coaching is helping them understand that some things you just can't find online, and the knowledge transfer, especially what we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years, where we're starting to see a huge wave of baby boomers. We have got to have more interpersonal communications, because the nuances of what it's going to take for our generation to step up and take over the leadership has to happen in that one-on-one legacy transfer.
That's actually a perfect segue, because someone had a question about, we keep talking about millennials will on average stay at a job 2 to 3 years, give or take.
Right.
So once, the kind of boomers start kind of moving out and the millennials have to take up these more senior positions, how's that going to work? You can't be a CEO for 2 years and then leave, stuff like that. Right. So how will that kind of work out?
Yeah, no, that will be the biggest test of our workforce, is how we're able to manage a moving workforce. Because millennials, what my studies have revealed is that millennials are not going to stop moving around. I think we're going to see more millennials settling down than they are now. But I think we're going to continue to see kind of that 3 to 5 year gap, because millennials have now been hardwired for change. We're so used to it. We're addicted to it. And we're going to bring that into the workforce with us. So as a hiring manager, you have the opportunity to get in front of the wave to say, how are we going to transfer that knowledge and information from one generation to the other in a faster way? right? So that doesn't mean that you're going to be, an overnight expert in something, but we're actually finding scientifically is that millennials learn faster.
Okay.
We learn with technology, we process information at a much higher pace than those have in the past because our brains have just been formed in a different time, in a different space. And so why don't we use that to our advantage to start tapping into a generation rather than putting arbitrary, after a year you get, this access, after 2 years you get promoted to this, account executive. Why don't we make it more skills based? Because millennials are so merit based that we want to know that whoever's in charge actually deserves to be there, right? So that's really what we're looking at being. So this 2 to 3 year mark, we're going to start to see it expanding to maybe 3 to 5. Hiring managers have got to be prepared for it, absolutely. But people at the top, who's to say, right? Because my study with millennial entrepreneurs is there still is this sense of adventure, and you can create that adventure inside of your company. And so if you're wanting to retain millennials, you keep that change, you keep that experience, and you keep that adventure by keeping things moving constantly.
Interesting. All right. So I've got someone that sounds like they work in HR and are a millennial themselves. So she asked, "It's obvious our staff don't know how good they have it. It's likely because it's their first job, but they never seem to be satisfied with the above average perks and benefits that they give at this company. They're always looking for more. Is there a way to address this? Sounds like they're a startup." Because she says, "We're not profitable yet, so I find this challenging and frustrating. I am a millennial myself, by the way. For color, it's my job to make sure they feel heard, to make sure all job needs are met, and that resources are given when needed."
Yeah. I think Sir Richard Branson actually does a really interesting job of this, is because he has such an amazing work culture at Virgin that he realizes that many people may not appreciate it. And so what he has is once a year he has corporate day, right?
Okay.
Where everybody has to dress up in suits and can't talk on their phones, and it's just kind of this joking way of saying, look how good you have it, right? So you don't necessarily need to have corporate day, but I think it's a really cool opportunity for maybe to do either a field trip. We've done that before. We've visited other workplaces to see how they work. We've talked about how can we actually improve, to say, hey, we see where we're at now, but how can we improve? So rather than saying you have it so good, just saying, well, how can we make it better? Making it a culture that you're constantly addicted to change and improvement, and again, making them feel like they're a part of it. So that's amazing that you have a workplace that is young, is vibrant, but you want to make sure that again that they feel like they've got a chance to be able to keep it going, because you feel like maybe you're at a great point right now, and that there's a lot of communication, there's a lot of flexibility, and you kind of have those key points that millennials want. But how can you make it better? Because anytime you start to settle, even if you're on level 2 to level 7, millennials are going to start shopping their resumes out on LinkedIn and other places, because we're just a generation that's addicted to change. Mm-hmm. So how do you make that addiction work for you and your company?
So that sounds kind of like a perfect employee survey type of, like, what would you like to see, that type of stuff.
Absolutely.
Do you have any recommendations on good ways to use it? Is it like a Survey Monkey? Is it just an email? Are there certain tools you think work better than others?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's definitely not an email. As we talked about before, only about 14% of all emails are ever read, as opposed to 98% of text messages. So if there's a way that you can implement a text message-based survey, then I absolutely encourage doing that. But it could be a focus group even. Okay. We conduct focus groups all the time for clients where you either send out. I love SurveyMonkey. It's a great. Google Forms has another free platform that you can use as well, because not every single company I've noticed can accept SurveyMonkey depending on their kind of compliance and all of that. But Google Forms is a really great option as well. And then do a follow-up in-person focus group. It's really great to have someone who's outside of the company come in and do that, where people feel like they can express things freely, because the thing with surveys is you're only going to get a very top level response. If you want to get into the deeper level of things, some sort of live focus group where you're then compiling those answers and presenting them to the leadership is an incredible way to actually not only gauge where your millennials are, but again, help them feel like, wow, they actually care what I have to say. Right? And having that opportunity to give feedback upward, that reverse feedback, is such a powerful way for millennials to get involved.
Okay. So I know text messaging seems to always be that kind of topic everyone talks about how millennials are always on text. And someone actually had a question about, hey, if their company doesn't give out company phones,
Yeah.
is it okay to text a millennial on their personal device?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, with anyone, and you can't just assume, again, because someone's a millennial, that they want to be texted. I think I shared the story before about, a car insurance company who kept texting me, and I called them finally, like, why are you texting me? They're like, oh, we see that you're under 30 and you meet this demographic. I was like, that's fascinating, right? Because I do this for a living, but I was like, please stop. But I like what you guys are doing, though. But it worked, right? I mean, because they caught me, it interrupted me in the middle of my day, and it just, dinged on my phone automatically.
You did.
Right, absolutely, and they got me to call them, so congratulations. But for anything else, you're going to want to get, agreement for whoever it is, right? So you're wanting to make sure that they have an opt-in, that they can, not receive them at any moment. But there's some really cool tools out there. I work with a company called nBorder, nBorder, and they're a really cool text-based information tool, and that you can continually communicate with your employees, everything from before they get hired to, throughout the hiring process, and make sure that everybody's on board with what it is that you're talking about, which is really cool. But there are so many ways that you can use, text-based services. I would not be worried about, feeling like you're imposing on them and their personal device if it's not based, because they're checking their email on that device anyway, their work email. So I don't think that they're going to mind getting a text message from their boss. I think they're actually going to like it.
I figure these days it's been a very BYO device.
Yeah.
So
I like that.
I feel like it's not surprising, right?
Yeah.
So one of the other questions we had was during the webcast, I think there was a slight cutout, but a lot of people were wondering what was the number one reason that millennials quit? Because I think that was a aha moment everyone was waiting for.
Yeah, and I mentioned at the top, it's mismanaged expectations.
Okay.
Right, so that's what we found across the board, and it's been interesting. So based off of survey data that some organizations have done, they've said, of course, it's the relationship that you have with your direct supervisor, which is the same for anyone who is a millennial or an Xer or a boomer. I mean, if you don't like your boss, you're going to quit, right? I mean, that's just human behavior. But, it's mismanaged expectations, and I'd say almost the very close second is training and development opportunities, which is actually really interesting. So Gallup did a poll, and it resonates with a lot of the survey work that we've done, that millennials are the only generation that said that they will actually quit if they don't get training and development opportunities.
They want to grow and learn.
Right, and not just professionally, but personally as well. So we're not just saying, I want to get a certificate to do my job better. It's like we want to have time management skills. We want to be able to manage up. We want to know how to deal with difficult conversations. I mean, some of our clients even do things like lunch and learns, where people are like on the team coming in and, they're teaching about, a hobby that they have, whether it's like photography or knitting or, whatever. But millennials, again, want to be a part of a community where everyone is constantly growing together.
Okay, cool. So we just got a question that came in from YouTube. I'm curious to know about the millennials joining the workforce. Many millennials are going to college and will leave with student loans. Ooh, I have those. Much higher than previous generations. Are there companies working to offer student loan payback assistance for working there?
Yeah, that's a great example of, that's a great question, I should say. So there are very few companies, and I really think that that's the next opportunity that's in front of us. So for example, PwC is really the leader right now as an organization who actually has a program that instead of investing in your 401k, you can actually invest. You can do an investment in someone's student loan. So I think it's really cool. Up to $10,000. They'll invest about $1,000. Don't quote me on that, but it's something like that. And so I've been able to talk with their team, and I think it's really impressive. So the government has had those types of options for a number of years. If you work there for about a decade, there's student loan forgiveness. But I really believe that that's the next precipice of where we need to be going, where we need to be offering not just 401k packages, because we're working with a generation that is so mobile. So why not say, hey, your priorities are our priorities, and helping millennials pay down that student debt, where many millennials, I mean, we don't even think Social Security is going to be around for us, right? True. And so because of that, we think much more short term. Yeah. And so by giving them an option to be able to help them invest back in themselves, I think is a huge opportunity. And it's actually one of the new projects I'm working on in the new year, because as someone who's in this space, I found as a millennial, I really think there's a huge opportunity for us to be able to, invest back into this generation. And one of their main concerns right now is student loan debt. It's stopping us from getting married. It's stopping us from, settling down, buying homes, and it's even causing us to switch jobs a lot faster than you would think. So I'm excited about it.
Okay, well, thank you so much. We're at time, but you know what? We will definitely put up Gabrielle's information for you so that you can contact her after this. And then we just want to remind you that you can continue to submit questions through our social media by using the hashtag HRCI Voices. That's HRCIVOICES. And Gabrielle's information, contact information, we will definitely make sure to post up. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I had a ton of fun.
Have a great day.
Bye, guys.